Antonín Dvořák, born in 1841, is the best-known figure of Czech culture abroad. I think it's rightly so, because he was able to find an ideal balance between perfection of musical composition and a general wide popularity. He enjoyed his popularity, but he always felt responsible towards his own native country, and his music reflects that. And I think it's a reason why Dvořák remains and probably will remain one of the most popular composers of all times. As a young boy, when I was discovering music, Dvořák's music was one of the first things I got to love. When I went out in the woods, I would take the score, I would sit down on the earth, on the floor, and contemplate how this music could sound, and sometimes even walking around with headphones and enjoying the visual feeling. Dvořák is really one of composers who described and mirrored beauties of nature. We are in the woods near Vysoká, a village about 60 kilometers south of Prague, which Dvořák loved because he spent his happiest years here. He would come here to spend all his summers in the last stage of his life, and that was not only because of the most beautiful nature around the place, but also because of the people who lived here. His former love and later sister-in-law and her husband, Count Konitz, lived nearby, around the corner. They had a beautiful house here and enabled Dvořák to buy another house a bit further from here, but still in Vysoká. In 1891, when he became professor of Prague Conservatory, he was close to being a national treasure in his home country. But he left it once more for a longer time when he went to New York. He was happy because he could get very inspired by new background. However, at the same time, he felt very homesick. If I could work with as few anxieties as I do in Vysoká, I would have been finished long ago. However, I cannot do it here. I have to teach on Monday, I have Tuesday free, but I am more or less busy on the other days of the week. In short, I cannot give so much time to my work, and if I could, I would not feel like it. It would be best to be back in Vysoká. I am refreshed there, I rest, I am happy. Oh, if only I were home again. That change in his mood in his last year in America would be really imprinted in the compositions of that time, especially the Cello Concerto. In this particular piece, what was important was his relationship to his sister-in-law, Josefina Čermáková. One must know that when Dvořák was a very young man, he probably fell in love with this woman, but out of many reasons, he was not able to marry her. Later on, he married her younger sister, Anna. Throughout his whole life, he stayed very emotional towards this particular woman, Josefina. When he was in the States, he got to know that Josefina was seriously ill. He actually incorporated a melody of his 4 songs, which she loved so much, into the second movement of his cello concerto. A short period later, on the 27th of May 1895, when Dvořák was still in the States, Josefina died. And after having incorporated her favorite music into the second movement of the cello concerto, he decided to rewrite the end of it. He prolonged it and put a great deal of nostalgic feelings and great deal of melancholy into it. Being close to the turn of the 19th and 20th century, this change of mood was maybe not only influenced by these personal relationships. It was probably also an effect of general inclination of society to darker themes. It brings us also close to the generation of Dvořák's students, and most of all of Suk, who really felt at home in this darker and more profound atmosphere. In about 1900, it starts to be almost impossible to say where the inspiration comes from, whether from the teacher to the student or from the student to the teacher. We are in the Czech Museum of Music, following here the Cello Concerto by Dvořák, and actually it's quite interesting to see that the original ending of this piece is not anymore in the score. You can observe that Dvořák's handwriting is actually quite neat. One could really conduct from that score. It's not possible to say the same about Janáček, for instance. I'm afraid that in that case the composer himself couldn't read the music after he had written it. I like it very much. I think it describes Dvořák's personality a lot. Josef Suk, unlike Antonín Dvořák, is not yet so well known abroad. He was born in 1874 and became Dvořák's most favorite pupil. Suk was a strange personality. At the very early phase of his life, he showed occupation with tragic aspects of human being. When he was a teenager, he even composed his funeral march. When I say his, I mean funeral march, which was meant to be played at his own funeral. And this side of Suk must have provoked Dvořák, who was much more optimistic, to encourage his student to compose in more optimistic, joyful and simple way. And it's great that Dvořák succeeded in this little mission, and not only through his wonderful teaching, but also through presenting his wonderful daughter to Suk. It was not that Dvořák wanted his daughter to fall in love with his most beloved pupil, but it happened, and in this way they became really not only respected colleagues but great friends and members of the same family. My first experience with Suk music was with Azrael Symphony, and from the very first tone I was fascinated by that piece. As soon as it was possible at the Academy of Performing Arts, I asked if I could have that piece as a subject of my studies. And after that school year, I decided I would propose that piece for my graduation concert. So I did it by heart. I learned it in all details, and since then, since 2004, I conduct that piece regularly. I think it deserves to be equally popular and respected as Mahler's symphonies. It's amazing. The Azrael Symphony, the most important work of Josef Suk, was inspired by losses of two beloved people in Suk's life, his father-in-law and teacher, the composer Antonín Dvořák, and his wife, Dvořák's daughter, Ottilie. In 1904, Antonín Dvořák suddenly died. Suk loved him so much, and he was a very emotional, hypersensitive person. This loss, this death, influenced him incredibly, and he decided to react to it by composing a symphony which would be a tribute to his teacher. When he was in the middle of his work on this symphony, his wife, Dvořák's daughter, who had been of a fragile health before as well, died. One can't see the state of mind in which Suk was when he composed the piece. It looks very well balanced and very professional. Every bar has a lot of indications how to do things, and the handwriting is very neat, much neater than Dvořák's actually. So it indeed was a kind of therapy. But the thing is that it wasn't therapy per se for himself, but as he put it in some of his correspondence, he said, you don't know how much I had to overcome to get over these tragedies of my life. But what has come out of it, this piece, should help the other in similar situations to overcome it faster. And that's also the reason why I love the piece so much. It's not all the horrors and morbidity and deaths of people and how terrible they are, but the way out of it. It's an act of braveness, an act of courage to find such a balance after these terrible events in his life.